to out of sight in seconds.
That this was about the most important evidence of something unusual happening in this area that they've ever had.
Men in Black.
Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, great movie.
About a secret government agency whose operatives tamper with UFO witnesses and cover up evidence of landings and close encounters.
I enjoyed it. Very funny.
What's funny peculiar, though, is the fact that for some people, the Men in Black aren't just a figment of Hollywood's imagination. MIBs, as they're known, have been around for almost as long as the UFO phenomenon itself.
And their role, same as in the movie, only this time, it's not a comedy.
I've interviewed many people who, after an impressive UFO sighting, or when it's reached the press, have been visited by usually one person from the Ministry of Defence.
I'm intrigued by some of these stories about the so-called Men in Black, and I think we're dealing with a number of different things. First, I think an element of it is urban myth, like dogs in microwaves and things like that, the classic friend of a friend story that you can never trace back to the source. Also, I think you're dealing with some UFO groups playing tricks on other UFO groups. There are some very strange characters involved in this particular field of study. Also, I think we're dealing with some fantasy-prone personalities, the sorts of people who like to, for example, dress up as police officers. I mean, every year you hear of cases like that coming to court. Is it so difficult to imagine that people would like to dress up and disguise themselves as secret agents?
Usually very, very polite. They take very detailed statements. They come bearing printed forms with them.
As far as I'm concerned, the Men in Black are real, but I don't think that they're aliens in disguise, and I don't think that they are some kind of a secret agency out to silence witnesses.
Some of these people who claim that the Men in Black are government agents seem to base their theories on nothing more than that's what the person said at the time.
I've talked to at least a dozen people in the northwest of England who've been visited by these Men in Black. They are genuinely telling the truth. They are describing real events that have happened to them.
1957, the Lancashire town of Wardle, not far from Rochdale. An ordinary sort of town, lived in by ordinary people, who were about to witness an extraordinary event.
I had somebody phone me up and said that there'd been some strange sighting of something or other at Wardle. So I went up to Wardle to see what it was all about and found some people who'd seen this illuminated sphere which had hovered outside the house. The first thought was a flying saucer. So I decided to try and find out just what it was they'd seen. So we carried on. People were writing in letters about what they thought it was, and these people were still adamant they'd seen something very unusual.
Alan believed he was chasing a big story. It would run and run. He filed his copy and the paper went to press.
And as soon as that appeared, I was told that we had visitors at the office. And I thought, hello, we've got little green men in spacesuits have come for me. But there were two tall men in pinstripe suits with bowler hats and rolled umbrellas. And they went in to see the editor, and shortly afterwards I was called in, and I was told they were from the ministry, and one of them said that under the terms of the Official Secrets Act, the editor had agreed not to publish any more about the Wardle incident, and that I would cease my inquiries. And that put the damper on everything. That was the end of it.
May 1975, a young pilot, Carlos de los Santos Montiel, was flying a light aircraft towards Mexico City International Airport when he was buzzed by 3 smallish UFOs. I think they were no more than about 8 or 9 feet in diameter. 2 parked themselves above each wing, and 1 shot underneath the aircraft. He was very frightened, and at one stage he could not lower his undercarriage. Emergency was declared, the runways were closed down. Fortunately, he made a safe landing. The craft by this time had shot off at fantastic speed. They were tracked on radar. He was very frightened, disturbed by this incident. He was invited to go on television. On his way to the television studio, 2 cars pushed his car off the road. 4 men came towards him. He said they were dressed in black, typical men in black. They had broad shoulders, very odd eyes which didn't blink, rather Scandinavian appearance, and they just threatened him. They said it will be more than your life's worth if you go on that television program. And he was very frightened, and needless to say, he didn't go on the television program.
In 1964, a family day out. Dad takes a snap of his daughter, but when the photos returned from the chemists, there had been some unexpected developments.
Of course, when I walked in to collect my photographs, the manageress tackled me immediately and she said, "Oh, Jim, you've wasted a marvellous photograph here. There's a lovely photograph of Elizabeth, but who's the big man standing behind her?" Well, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I said, "We never saw any big man. We never saw anybody all afternoon." The local newspaper, the Cumberland News, these were the people who started all the bother. Once the public got hold of it, and of course it was front page. The 2 men that arrived dressed in black were really smart, there was no doubt about it. They were like the London businessman going to work with his black suit and rolled up umbrella, and of course I noticed they did have bowler hats.
If you like, play along with the party line of the Men in Black, all you have to do is just sort of add some little idiosyncrasy to your talk. For instance, one witness said to me that the 2 people who came to visit him, who he'd always interpreted as being from the British government, wearing smart business suits and clearly human beings, not aliens, used to just communicate with one another using numbers. They never used names.
And of course, the next thing was to question them and say, had they any identity? And the immediate reply was, "Well, you're not supposed to know our identity. We go by numbers. We belong to the ministry."
Well, I was told they were men from the ministry. What ministry wasn't mentioned, but I took it to be the Ministry of Defence.
With the Rochdale Observer case, for example, I think you have a classic case of someone who allowed themselves to become over-impressed with somebody turning up in a smart suit and flashing what they said was an official ID.
And they asked, could I take them out to Bruff Marsh and show them exactly where the photograph was taken. And when we arrived there, one of them stood directly in front of me and he said, "This is where you saw the spaceman." I said, "No, excuse me, we didn't see anybody." "Oh, thank you very much," he said. He turned to the other one and said something to the other one. They started to walk away. They got into the car. I naturally thought they were going to turn around. They disappeared over the bridge, car and everything. That's the last I ever saw of them. Left me standing.
There is an intelligence agency connected with most major governments around the world, and certainly in Britain it's part of an organisation called DI-55, which is a defence intelligence unit connected with the British government.
The MOD does not turn up at people's houses demanding that they hand over films and intimidating them into silence. Again, that's science fiction. It's simply not the way the MOD operates.
The black side of the government spent £11 million in UFO research in 1978 alone, and that came from a very good source indeed.
These men at no time were threatening, but it was just a very reserved attitude. you began to wonder what the exercise was. Whether they were here to cover something up or to find out what I knew or something else. This we'll never know.
I was rather angry about it, that somebody who, from outside could come along and tell me that I couldn't do what I was being paid to do. I thought this was worth further investigation, but my hands were tied. The editor had agreed not to publish anything, so I just had to let it lie.
A case more than 40 years old, and still all those unanswered questions. We're getting used to those.
They were white in colour, grey, white